introduces this task that we have to walk in a manner worthy of our calling. And we want to define some of those things a little bit as we move forward here. He says, I therefore a prisoner for the Lord, and we talked about that at the outset of our study here. This is one of the prison epistles. He wrote this while he was imprisoned for preaching the gospel. I therefore a prisoner for the Lord urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. We need to break this sentence down a little bit and look at its component parts before we put it together. So he first says, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. And so there is a particular type of living that is fitting for being in Christ. If there is a worthy manner of walking, then there also is what? One that is unworthy. You can't distinguish that there is a worthy set of behaviors without also understanding that that means of necessity that there's also behavior that's unworthy, that's unbecoming, that's inappropriate. So he says, I urge you to walk in a manner that's worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Okay, what have they been called to? What have we been called to? Okay, to be a Christian. To come out from the world and be separate. This is a calling in the sense of someone saying, okay, if this is what you desire, you need to come and be in this place at this time and part of this assembly. And so the term that the English term we use for church, what's the origin of that word? Okay, so it's a Greek term, ekklesia, which means a religious organization? Nope, doesn't mean that at all. It means the called out. It means that they say, okay, we have an assembly to deal with these things at this time, and all of the appropriate people there come out of society and join that assembly to engage in that business. And so we've been called out of the general population of the world by the gospel. And isn't that in fact what Jesus did? He went around and called people, come, follow me. Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, and you'll find rest for your souls. So he called men to come and become his disciples, his students, to learn and listen from him. We've been called out of the world into that school, that group, that ecclesia, that church that has assembled itself around Christ and become his disciples. And as a result of that, there is a manner of life that is worthy of that calling. You'll recall that the very night in which Jesus was betrayed, Peter is accused of being one of them. In fact, he's accused of it on more than one occasion, right? A couple of different, in one case it appears that it was a group, in another case it was a young lady. But they said what? Hey, you were with him. How'd they know? One of the things they said is your speech betrays you. In other words, you talk like they talk. You act like they act. We can tell that you're part of that group. Just by looking and watching you, the way that he was walking, his manner of life, even in that night, gave away his association with Jesus. By the way, what did he do to try to distance himself from that association that night? He denied it. He cursed. He did all sorts of things to say, no, you got me confused with someone else. I'm not like that at all. Incidentally, Jesus had told him that he would do that 3 times that night. After he did it the 3rd time, what did Jesus do? He just looked at him. You had look of disappointment that you got from your mom and your daddy. Jesus looked at him. What did Peter do? Text says he wept bitterly. He realized what he had done. I've done that kind of stuff before in my life, where I was in a situation that I didn't want to be identified. So I would act in a particular way that I knew betrayed that manner of life, so that people would go, yeah, he's one of us. What he's saying here, Paul, to the church at Ephesus is, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of your association with Christ. And then he defines characteristics, not behaviors, not words, not specific things, but general characteristics that describe that walk with all humility. To walk in a manner worthy of our calling means to walk with all humility. Not with a little bit of humility, not with some humility, but with all humility. And gentleness. Now, that word gentleness, what does it mean? It's an interesting word. And I'm not necessarily asking you to give me the Greek term that was translated gentle there and what that word means. That might be a worthy exercise to find that out, because it might help us understand even better than what we're fixing to do. I'm actually talking about the English word gentleness. Okay. Kind and soft, but we have to understand and define soft a little bit, because what do we mean by someone being soft? That terminology has taken up a negative connotation in our current circumstances. No one wants to be soft on crime.
What about controlling our strength?
Okay, controlling our strength. I think that's a good way to conceptualize it. We most commonly, and we don't make these distinctions as much today as they did in times past, we most commonly use this term gentle when we talk about people by talking about gentlemen. And they're being set apart from what? Rogues. People who have no decorum about them, that have no rules that they follow, that are undisciplined. And so gentleness has to do as much as anything with the discipline that we apply to ourselves, which goes to Peggy's point about controlling our strength. Not having that strength, but controlling it and using it properly and for good, rather than improperly or for evil. And so, was Jesus gentle? Was he being gentle in the temple when he overturned the money changers' tables, made that whip, and drove those people out of the temple? Was he being gentle? Was he soft? And so being gentle doesn't necessarily mean that you give up all your strength, but it means that you channel that strength and use it properly. And I think that's what he's talking about here. With all humility, understanding our place in the world. Listen, mankind is greater than the animals. There's some people that get it backwards. There's some people that put more value in animals than they do humans. Humility doesn't require me to think that I'm less than an animal, but it does require me to understand that I'm no better than any other person. It does require me to understand that all of us are below God. Yes, sir.
I think that certainly part was an exception here, temple. But when I hear gentleness, I certainly think of how you handle other people. You know, and you can almost like you're handling an egg or something versus just like throwing things around. You know, you just
The difference between being disciplined and undisciplined, careful and not careful. It may take a lot of strength to move something, but if it's fragile, you control the use of that strength so that you don't destroy it. Right. And by the way, that applies across the board to a lot of things, but he's generally talking about the manner with which people who are called into the body of Christ ought to conduct themselves. With all humility, with gentleness, what's he go on to say? With patience. Meaning what? Okay. Steadfastness. We don't quit easily. We don't quit just because things don't go our way. Long-suffering is another concept that's closely akin to this. But also an awareness of what? It takes time. The bulletin article this morning, I don't want to steal all the thunder from it, but it's a great illustration, so I'm going to use it again in class. Something like 85% of the U.S. population that can't play a musical instrument reports that they wish they could. There's all sorts of things that they attach to it about it makes you a better person, it makes you smarter, it makes you this, it makes you that. They associate all kind of good with that task. They want to do it. They wish they had. They regret that they didn't learn already. 2/3 say that they plan to learn. How many actually do? Anybody know why everybody plans to learn how to play something? By the way, a bunch of them even buy something to learn to play. A guitar, harmonica, ukulele, a fife. I got a drawer full of some things that I've collected over the years that I want to learn to play one day that I haven't learned to play yet. I do play some things, but not everything. Why don't we not go through with it, even though we've invested some time and money into it? We maybe even started taking lessons. Why don't we not go through with it? We want to do it really, really bad. We associate all kind of good things with it. We may even take a few steps toward it. Why don't we stop and not do it? Because we're impatient. We have the concept that I'm going to buy a guitar, and I'm going to sit down for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to play a song like, fill in whatever musician that you want to fill in. And it doesn't work that way. How long does it take to master a musical instrument? a long, long time, a lot of work, and a lot of that work is tedious and not fun. You're learning notes and scales and how to control your breath and how to buzz your lips or how to hold an embouchure in a particular way to play whatever it is that you're trying to play if it's a wind instrument. How to do this, how to do that, which buttons to press, which buttons not to press. How to sustain it, how to stop it. And you can work for weeks and master a scale, and you go and play that scale for somebody, and do they clap for you? No. That's not what they want to hear. What do they want to hear? They want to hear a song. Everybody wants to play a song after lesson 1. And it doesn't work that way. They're impatient. And they quit. Listen, Christianity's exactly the same thing. The walk that we have been called to walk is exactly the same way. You're not going to get it perfect immediately. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen automatically. If it happened automatically, we would all be in the body and wouldn't have to be called out of the world. Because you know what happens automatically? We go into the world. We do what we want to do. We satisfy our own desires. That's what happens automatically. To walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which we've been called, we actually have to train ourselves to behave in ways that are quite unautomatic. And that requires patience. And that requires my ability to fall down and skin my knee and get back up and try again. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 7 times. How many times must we forgive a brother? It's infinite. Why is it infinite? Because it's hard. So this is patience that has to be focused on ourselves, not thinking that we're going to automatically be some great thing. Listen, none of us are going to be Paul tomorrow. It took Paul a long time to gain the knowledge and the insight. And then he had an advantage as well. What was that? He had some inspired insight to some things. And we talked about that earlier in this book, right? It was revealed to him, the mystery of Christ, whereby when you read, you can understand my insight into the mystery of Christ, he said. We have to read, talk about it, and break it down, and have these discussions to really understand what this one word, walk with patience, is really about. If you think that you're just going to automatically be a devout Christian tomorrow because you decided today that that's what you wanted to be, your Christian walk is going to last about as long as your New Year's resolution or as that diet that you started. Why do people quit dieting? Because it's hard, and they're not patient. And they get on the scale the next morning. They've been on their diet for a day. They ate salad yesterday. They didn't like it. They really wanted that blueberry muffin and a bowl of Bluebell ice cream. But they disciplined themselves, and they made it through the whole day without eating anything, and they get on the scale the next morning, and they weigh the exact same thing they did the day before, and they say, well, forget this noise. I'm going to enjoy life. How long does it take you to get into shape? It doesn't happen overnight. You have to practice. patience. Humility, gentleness, with patience. It also extends outside of myself, bearing with one another in love. There's a lot of one another passages in the New Testament. I love the one another passages. I love talking about them. I have a lesson called One Another where I just pull a bunch of these passages in and talk about all these different aspects of our one anotherness. Can I coin that word? Do you realize that he says here that one anotherness involves bearing? What does that word bear mean? To carry. And you know what it associates? You bear children. Is that easy? Is that painless? You bear a load. Everything that we associate that word bear with means what? Work. Uncomfortable. Not at ease. Not even at liberty. Because while I'm bearing some heavy load, what can I not do? Let's bring this to an absurd picture so that we grasp it. If I tie a piano to your back, what are you not going to be able to do? You're not going to stand up straight. You're not going to move very quickly. If you can, we're going to assume that you can actually carry the piano. But you're not going to do it very fast, are you? And you're not going to be able to dance with it. You're not going to be light on your feet, in other words. Your feet are going to be very heavy, and it's going to be treachery. And you're going to be happy if you can just lift one and move forward. You certainly can't move to the right or to the left or backwards or forwards or go anywhere you want to go. You're very limited in your motion when you bear this load. Bearing with one another. This one anotherness doesn't come cheap, and it doesn't come easy. I have to bear the weight of association. Is there value and benefit from association? Yes. Are there limits that come with it? Yes. Best example I can think of off the top of my head. When you were young and single, we say that you are what? Footloose and fancy-free. You can move about easily. You can do what you want to do. You can do it when you want to do it. There's no restrictions. There's no one to answer to. There is nothing to stop you from doing whatever. What happens when you get married? You now have a ball and chain. Why that imagery? Why do we use that language? Why do we speak of it that way? Because that association, as great as it is, as good as it is, as necessary as it is, because it's not good for a man to be alone, also automatically means what? That I'm not as free anymore as I once was, that I'm not at liberty to go anywhere that I want to go, do anything that I want to do it anytime that I want to do it, that I now have someone I am associated with that I must answer to. I have to give time to that person in that relationship. I have to consider the other party and consider their needs. Not just equal to my own needs, but I have to consider their needs what? First. So there is a certain bearing that you have to do from the one anotherness of this association, but he says, walk in a manner worthy of the calling. Bear up. The calling is a calling into a body, and so you are a part of a body, and you therefore must function and do your role and supply your part to the whole, so that the whole body can work as it ought to work. Another illustration from another letter, but it's essentially the same thing that he's saying here. You need to walk in a manner worthy of this calling, because this is what you have been called into. Humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another in love. That's what ties it all together. You don't bear with people unless you love them. I'll also point it out that you don't have to like someone in order to love them. It's great if the person that you love is also the person that you like. But you have to love everyone. You don't have to like everyone. You have to love your enemies even, but you don't have to like your enemies. You have to love your mother-in-law, but you don't have to like your mother-in-law. I love you, Kathy. Think about this in those terms. Bearing with one another in love, eager. What does that word eager mean? I'm sorry? Anxious, that's a good word. Looking forward to. Ready to. Having prepared yourself to. People are eager to go on vacation. They're excited about it. They're excited about packing and getting ready and anticipating going. What are they less eager to do? Clean up and put away when they come home. They're less eager about that. We understand what the word eager means. To be looking forward to and wanting to do something. Eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit. There is a unity that we're called to. That we need to be eager to maintain, eager to work to preserve. Because what happens naturally to that unity is it falls apart. So we have to maintain it. We have to put it together. We have to continue to repair it. Fix the things that are going wrong. Address the things that need to be addressed before there's a problem. We call that preventive maintenance, right? When we replace something or repair something before it creates a problem. So we change our oil and we change the air filter and we replace the tires, and we do that before the car fails to keep it from failing. We need to work that kind of preventive maintenance to preserve the unity of the Spirit, because the Spirit calls us to unity, to be of one mind, to be of one judgment, to think the same things. We've got to stop clearly. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate those that have been watching online.